The day has finally come for you to go back in a car. Today I'll be doing the M56 valve cover swap on my M54 over here. The plastic cover is warped, it's cracked, it's all the bad things you don't want. I replaced the gasket once already, but it still leaks, so this was the next option. I'll put a link to the 50s Kid video. He made a great video on how to wire the ignition coil setup from the M56 harness to the M54. Pretty easy, honestly, but there's no point me making a video about it if he's already made a perfect one about that specifically. So aside from being aluminum and having the newer style pencil coils that the S55 uses in the modern BMWs like the F80s and the N54 and all that good stuff, this valve cover also has an integrated CCV system as opposed to the external one these cars are notorious for having issues with. Basically, you can see over there we have the vent hose from the valve cover that goes below to the actual diaphragm and all that good stuff with the CCV on the stock M54, and it's pretty much a known issue that you're going to have to replace these every 50 to 70,000 miles depending on your climate, probably sooner if you live in a colder one. It also is a bunch of plastic hoses, which on a nearly 20-year-old car with 177,000 miles, this thing's going to be fraught with problems all the way around with vacuum leaks everywhere. So between the cover swap and the replacement of all that garbage CCV, I think we'll have a much better running engine. If you guys are watching this video, it's more than likely you guys already know what's up with this and you kind of have a reason why you want to do it or why not to do it. So I'll be doing that now. First, I want to take off all the intake garbage that we don't really need right now. I say garbage even though I replaced it just yesterday. So I'll be taking off the air box, the intake hoses, and the disc valve to get more space to where we want to work. There are two ways about doing this whole thing, I think, in my opinion, if you want to properly remove or you want to properly go around the existing CCV system. So what the 50s Kid was saying he would do if he was not going to be reusing his CCV system was he was going to have this vent hose on the M56 cover actually circulate back to the top of the intake manifold and then reuse that stock CCV pipe, which I'm probably going to do. The question was, and you'd also have to cap off the dipstick port where the CCV also feeds back in. One thing I would probably have to see about is whether I want to remove all the CCV actual parts below. I can circumvent those parts, but it's just a matter of do I really want to remove all that stuff. It can be a little bit difficult to remove, and I really don't want to break that top piece. So let's get to it right now. I'm first going to remove the intake stuff, and then I'll move on to all the wiring and good stuff like that. Okay, all the intake stuff's out of the way and kind of spread across my very messy garage, and then we've got the ICV bracket is all loosened up, so I could take this out if I wanted to a little bit later. I've got this bracket loosened up, and of course we can also see my terribly leaking power steering system. We've got the reservoir hemorrhaging fluid everywhere. This hose is disgusting. It's just leaking everywhere, so we'll need to change those up. It is dripping on the floor as well, so it's kind of annoying to have ATF fluid everywhere. So yeah, I'm going to replace that very soon, probably the next video. For now, we're going to focus on this stuff as well. So I've also taken off, or rather loosened, this sort of bracket on top of the manifold we can have over here. This is part of the CCV system. You can see this line I probably should replace anyways, but what I was saying earlier was I'm going to use this line as well, keep it there, but then instead of having this guy feedback down to that weird diaphragm with the original CCV system, I'll have it go directly to over here. The struggle with this, of course, is that this line is, of course, very old and brittle. In fact, just as brittle as this terrible thing over here, so I have to be very careful when I remove it as to not completely destroy it. If that does happen, what I may do is take this line off and then cap that port, because I do have some vacuum caps, and then just run a straight hose from over here and the new cover to over here. Either way, we're not stranded, so we should be good to go, and I'm going to start going ahead and trying to take off that little hose from this rail. Whether or not I break it or not, we'll see. Down there you can kind of see that's where the dipstick tube goes, and that's where the CCV used to connect to the dipstick tube, and I put a vacuum cap over that as well. So of course, inevitable this happened. I got this guy off without a problem, and then yeah, you can kind of see it broke off down here, which doesn't matter because I was going to take this off anyways. But the part I do care about, or did care about, was this guy, which initially connected the back of the manifold, or yeah, went from over here to the other side of the manifold, connected to this guy, kind of like this. So that's unfortunate, but it's okay. So I'll probably just block off that end piece of that little bracket over there, and then we can go ahead and take this off and we can cap it off, or we can run something across. We'll kind of see how it goes. But for now, I'm going to try and take this off and then take out the rest of the CCV system just by ripping it out as much as I can. This is actually strangely enjoyable, just ripping this entire thing out. And here we have this piece of garbage. This does not need to be there anymore either. Nice. Yeah. Okay, so this guy over here will go to the intake manifold. We took it off already. This is the part that broke. The second line that goes to the end of the second port on the manifold over here. You can see I've capped it off with a vacuum port. And then on this one, on the side that broke, I put a little vacuum guy on this side as well. I'll probably put a zip tie for now. It's a little bit of a looser fit than I would have liked. In fact, it's actually okay, but I'll put a zip tie for safe measure. And then this side will go into the intake manifold. And then this guy used to go to the CCV, but now we're going to have it go directly to the M56 valve cover because that valve cover, like I said earlier, has integrated CCV, which is a different system altogether. Well, actually kind of more like the same thing, but in the valve cover instead of outside of it. So here I've got the M56 valve cover fitting. It is slightly smaller than the M54 one, so if you find it at a junkyard like I did, I just nabbed the connector as well. So as you can see, they're both about the same size on the end of them, so we can use a just some typical hose just to connect it. I'll probably use some heater hose that I found at AutoZone for now, but later on I might want to do some hydraulic hose to make that even better for oil, but I think this is going to work just fine without much of an issue. I should mention it'd be a good idea to replace all these O-rings as well. I'm not because I don't have the part, so I'm going to put them back for now. I'm just going to clean them up real nice and good, put some oil on them as well, and also clean up the ports they went into on the manifold, and then that should be good enough for now, but I will order some of these to replace them eventually. Oh, and for the vacuum caps, the one on the dipstick tube, the one on the tube on the intake manifold part, I bought those all from this pack on Amazon. I'll link in the description below. 02253 Dorman Help branded caps. These things work just fine, so we should be good with those. Now it's just going to be a matter of putting the new cover on, changing up the wiring. Like I said, you should check out the 50 Skid video. I'll link his video below on how to wire it up to get it correctly, but I will show you how to take it out of the car if you'd like. E46, E39, a little bit different. E46 has the DME, or whatever you want to call it, MS43 on this side. E39 is on that side over there, which is actually a little bit closer to all the wiring anyways, so it makes things just a little bit easier. Well, taking the cover off itself is very, very simple. It's just a bunch of screws and taking out the ignition coils. Now, you will need the newer style ignition coils, the pencil style I was talking about earlier, that are used in the newer cars, like my 535i, it's there. And you will need 6 of those. I actually have a used set from my 535i. They were perfectly working just fine, but I upgraded to a better one in the 535, so I might as well use those for something else, like this car. So get those. You're going to need, I would buy some new grommets, the rubber ones, if you haven't gotten those. I'll put a link in the description from Amazon as well. The bolts are reusable, so I would just keep using those. And then the washers are also reusable, so those are fine as well. Just make sure you have one on each of your bolts. So we can remove that. And then to get to the wiring anyways, we need to remove that box up in the corner with the cabin air filter anyways, which will give you more access to the back of the valve cover. So should be good to go. Something else I wanted to mention real quick is that all these vacuum lines that kind of go from the secondary air pump and all the way around the valve cover are all very brittle if your car is, I mean, any M54 is pretty old at this point, so you're going to have things cracking and breaking. So, for example, this little vacuum pipe that initially went from over here to kind of where the intake manifold sits, that thing just broke in several places for me, but I haven't been able to replace it, so what I've been doing is just putting little segments of vacuum line in between, so that does work as a temporary fix. But for now, I'm going to get the ignition coil wires out. I would recommend disconnecting the battery because, you know, electrical stuff, DME, you don't want to mess with that when the battery's connected. Pull out this little guy over here. Don't mind my extremely messy trunk. There's just a bunch of car parts and a skateboard. So we got over here the battery right there. We can go ahead and remove the negative terminal right over there, and we should be all set in terms of the disconnected battery. I would avoid closing the trunk now that the batteries are connected, so I can freely work on the DME box without having to worry about any electrical issues. Just a bunch of plastic cowling and also the cabin air filter. Just be careful not to break any of it because it is pretty old plastic, but that should be it. Looks like we got a bunch of 5mm Allens for the lid of the DME box, so let's go ahead and remove those carefully. These can get kind of brittle, so I wouldn't recommend using a power tool at first. You can just kind of break them a little bit. Here. So on the E39 we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 bolts, and I believe the E46, the box is on actually that side and not this side, so it would be a little bit different for you guys. Okay, now we can take the lid off. It looks like there are some silver washers, rubber grommets below them, but it looks like they didn't come off all the way on mine, so some of them came off, some of them didn't, but regardless, take the lid off very carefully. Looks like there is something back there. Let's keep it on. Looks like a tab of some sort. Well, that's quite annoying. The back of this box has broken a little bit, so ugh. I hate old plastic. So now I can remove the wires to the ignition coil harness, which as you guys can see come from down here on the E39. I kind of go through this guy over here so we can take this piece off as well to gain access to that harness. Wow, that was really annoying. Okay. Ah, good. My finger's bleeding. Okay, now we can finally get this whole thing out of here. So, just gonna lift out. There's a few little squishy things. What I mean to say is grommets, but you know. There we go. Pulled out of there. So now we can disconnect it from two spots. There's one spot back here, which I believe is some sort of power. Simply two tabs, and it just kind of comes up like that. Take a look at that. And there's also one connection a little bit further in here. This has all the trigger wires for each of the 6 injectors. Not injectors, coil packs. And it just looks like there's one push tab, and it just sort of comes on out like that. So now we can take this whole thing out, and then when we have the actual ignition coils undone, as long with their connectors, we can take those out, and then we can transfer the M56 harness to here. We just need to repin this connector, and also use this connection to move it over to the other one as well. Alrighty, now I'm going to unbolt all of the ignition coils as well as their grounds. Yes, it looks like they're 10 millimeters across the board. There might be a few 6 or 7 millimeter guys that have some grounds as well, so just keep that in mind as you go. And after that, we can take the cover off. This is the M56 valve cover over here. I've cleaned it up nice and good, at least to the best of my abilities, with just simple brushes and purple power. This stuff is still a little bit dirty, but you know, not a big deal compared to what it was when I got it. It was filthy when I got it. It was pretty caked up there with a bunch of gunk, probably from infrequent oil changes in the previous car I was in, and just you know, not taking care of the car properly. So we should be good to go now. I've got these little pieces over here. So this essentially makes up the CCV system inside of the M56 cover. So all these chambers you can see. This is the vent that goes back to the intake manifold, which I was talking about earlier. But essentially, the oil vapor or whatever blow by will come through this little port in this area, and then you'll have it sort of travel through these chambers, and it'll get filtered out with the oil and the actual vapor, and it'll come out. There's a little chamber over here as well that kind of allows. That's where you can see the actual diaphragm for the CCV, kind of similar to the one in the traditional CCV system for the M54, except it's in the valve cover, like I was saying. There are a ton of T30 screws holding it in, so it is serviceable. I mean, you can take it apart, you can clean it up. The part you can't service, though, is this diaphragm over here. You can't even take it off from the other side. If you do, you will have problems. And of course, BMW doesn't sell the part individually. I do think some eBay sellers actually do sell that now. So if I do find one that seems legit, I'll try it out and see how it works. After all it takes is taking the beauty covers off and then taking off this little thing from the top. So I think it'll be okay. Taking a look at the top of the valve cover, it is just taller than the M54 one, just considering how much there is going on. I'm going to put the screws and put the plates back on here, and then one thing to keep in mind, though, is that I did notice that these little gaskets are pretty brittle. They're pretty weak. They're not great, but at the end of the day, it's going to be not submerged, but it'll be covered in oil, so I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. Plus, we're separating oil vapor and we're separating oil itself, so it's not like there's going to be some vacuum because it's a big hole here, so I'm I'm not too worried about that. I might use some gasket maker in some areas, like over here, for example. There's a piece I just kind of broke off, and it is right over here, so I might just do that real quick. But other than that, nothing too crazy. I'm not going to torque these very much, just a little bit, and that should be plenty. Got the plates back in, so now we can put the valve cover back on the M54 over there. Something to remember, so these cars actually use a different style valve cover gasket. It is a thin plated metal one. It has metal inside the gasket, so you can actually reuse them. I took it off the car, I found it in the junkyard, so I'll be using that one along with some better quality spark plug, tube seal, whatever you want to call it. These gaskets are all one piece as well, and they're much higher quality, made of a Viton type of rubber. I believe it's just a higher quality one, and they don't really leak, so good to know. Those are less susceptible to failure than the garbage ones on this cover, so we'll be reusing all of those. The metal gasket is just such a nice thing to have. It's no longer really going to be an ordeal. You can actually put it on the engine before you put the cover on, because it still needs to fill in those little half moons for the vanos. So we can go ahead and put that cover on, or the gasket rather, on now, and we can put this entire cover on, which is going to be pretty fun. Alright guys, I've got the actual valve cover gasket on the engine itself. You guys can kind of see it there. It is correctly in place, and I've also got the tube seals for the spark plugs on the valve cover now, like this. I don't know how much you guys can see, but it's kind of there. And I'm going to put the valve cover on, at least loosely place it on there, and then we should be good to go for starting to torque down the bolts and all that stuff, but I'll loosely hand tighten them first. As recommended by BMW, be sure to put down some gasket maker on little half moons for the vanos as well. Time to torque down the valve cover to 89 inch-pounds all around. We'll do a crisscross pattern of some sort, kind of distribute the torque evenly. I'll probably start in the middle and then just kind of spread out from there. So hopefully we should be fine. The Bentley manual says 89 inch-pounds, but it doesn't even give you a sort of sequence of which one to go first. So no big deal. Common sense just tells me to do it the kind of crisscross and evenly distribute the force. So let's get started. Don't forget about the bolts in the middle of the valve cover, as well as the one in the back corner, sort of toward the exhaust area. You might want to use an angled bit to get at that bolt. Now that the M56 valve cover is all torqued to spec, we can now figure out how to make our plumbing from the M56 cover with this little guy over here back to the intake manifold with this guy over here. So I've got some 5/8 inch diameter tubing. I got some AutoZone, and it's going to work just fine. It actually fits almost perfectly on both of these fittings. I'll give you guys a little demo real quick. Check this out. So you have the tubing over here, and then this is going to fit in pretty much press fit perfectly when I want it in there properly. So I'm going to go ahead and connect one side to the valve cover, and then I'll see how long I need to make it all the way to the intake manifold, kind of go below it to kind of keep it concealed and look factory. Check it out. Here's what I've gotten so far. I've gotten the hose on the valve cover side. Here I have some excess hose as some children run by. Okay, as I was saying, we have the valve cover side connected over here, and we got this hose that goes below the intake manifold and pops out to the one area, kind of like if you think about how the M54 CCV hose would go straight down. This one's just angling up right over here, and then we're going to have that directly go into this portion over here with, of course, this piece. Now I'm going to convert the pinouts for the M56 harness to work with the MS43 with the M54, so everything talks nicely together with the new style ignition coils like this. These are my old Bosch M54 ignition coils I'll be using in this car right now. There's nothing wrong with them at all. They are completely fine. I just upgraded to Eldor coils in the M54, so that car actually needs better coils. If you have an E46, this is going to be not a problem at all for you. The harness is super long off the M56 because it's designed for an E46, obviously, because the DME is on the driver's side of the car, so you need the extra length from that side of the car to reach the DME box. On the E39, though, the DME is right next to the exhaust manifold, which probably wasn't a good idea on their part, but it is, and it's a very short harness as a result because it's literally right next to the coils. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm just going to leave it like this and see if I can manage the wires, but yeah, it's going to be a little bit annoying.
A few moments later.
Okay guys, made a lot of progress since I was last filming, but I've got the entire wiring stuff all set up. The new coils are in, or the old coils, but new to this car. They're in, they're all grounded and stuff, they're all wired up. The DME stuff all, I'm assuming, works, but we're going to hopefully test it out very soon. So I'm just kind of routing the CCV sort of plumbing right now with the this guy going to the intake manifold. So my idea before of using the OEM connections and then just using one hose is not really going to work, I don't think, because the problem is the hose will kink if you go either above or below. So my solution is I've got an L-shape sort of elbow that is 5/8 size for the auto parts store, and I'm hoping by having this we should be pretty much good to run this setup and have it sort of bend without kinking at all. Worst case, have a little bit of bend, but it won't be enough to kink the hose like it was before. Well, guys, I think we may be in luck here. So it seems like the setup is working. I kind of routed this side through the intake manifold and out the bottom, and I kind of fangled with my hand from this side, and I got this guy to come out here, and it fully connects to the valve cover. Then we have this guy, which is going to line up almost perfectly with the portion over here. In fact, let's do it right now. Oh yeah, that's exactly what we wanted. And then, of course, it'll just pop back into place. And I think that's all we need to do, guys. I think that's basically the setup for this entire swap. Gonna put the intake box back and we'll give her a start. Okay, so assuming I didn't mess anything up egregiously, the car should start now. The battery's reconnected and all that stuff, so I am going to see if it does in fact start. This is what I think of the stock CCV system. Well, guys, that wraps this video up. If it helped you out, give it a like and subscribe for more content like this. It's been about a month since the install, getting better MPG, better top-end performance, and just good things overall.